Hello and welcome to Academic English. Today we will look at IELTS and CELBAN and try to understand which exam might be a little bit easier to take in order to achieve the scores that you need for the regulatory bodies or to start working as a nurse in Canada. Both exams have a group test component and a speaking component to it. For IELTS you have listening, reading and writing, and then you have the speaking interview. For CELBAN, you have listening, writing, and reading, and then you have the speaking interview, which could be before the group test or after the group test, maybe on different day. For IELTS, is usually following the group test. There's a little break, and then you have the interviews. Listening in IELTS is 40 minutes, in CELBAN it's 45 minutes. The reading and writing in IELTS are both an hour long. Meanwhile, in CELBAN, it's 40 minutes each. For speaking, this is where IELTS, I feel like it has a little bit of a pull. Speaking for IELTS is 14 minutes. Meanwhile, for CELBAN, it's 35 minutes, so almost double, but we'll talk about it. Okay, in terms of the listening, for CELBAN, you have about 13 to 14 tasks, ranging from 30 seconds long to 3.5 minutes long. Meanwhile, for IELTS, you have 4 longer tasks. Each task has about 10 questions, and altogether it's always 40 questions for listening in IELTS. In CELBAN, there's no set number of questions per test. Each test is different. The shorter tasks, they will have 1 to 2 questions. The longer ones will have 12, 13 questions, depending on the task. In regards to the types of questions, CELBAN has multiple choice questions, and the most recent addition is the symptoms chart questions, in which you just tick an X next to the symptom or the frequency of the symptom, the severity of the symptom in the chart, so definitely not difficult. Meanwhile, in IELTS, you have notes completion, sentence, summary, chart completion. You have multiple choice questions, matching questions, short answer questions, so definitely a lot more complex in the types of questions that you get. In CELBAN, the conversations are all related to nursing. You've heard them before. You've had those conversations before with your patients, with the doctors you've worked with your coworkers. Very familiar conversations or topics. Meanwhile, in IELTS, the conversations and the monologues are ranging from a variety of topics, a variety of fields. If you think about it, IELTS is supposed to prepare candidates to be able to go and study a bachelor degree or a master's degree in an English-speaking country. And all these students, they're studying in various fields, so that's why they incorporate in the IELTS exam a lot of different fields. So you could have geography, archaeology, economics, which can be quite challenging if you're not familiar with them. Meanwhile, in CELBAN, you have just nursing, all related to your field. So definitely a winner in that regards. In terms of reading, in IELTS, the reading exam is 60 minutes long. You have 3 tasks and about 13 to 14 questions per passage. The passage itself, it's about 800 to 1,000 and a little bit in terms of the number of words, which can be quite lengthy, and the passages themselves can be quite complex. When it comes to the reading part, in CELBAN, the reading task is 40 minutes, or the reading exam is 40 minutes. IELTS is 60 minutes, and there's a reason for that. In CELBAN, you have 4 tasks, but these are shorter, and each task has about 6 to 10 questions per task. Meanwhile, in IELTS, you have 3 tasks, longer texts, longer passages, and about 13 to 14 questions per passage. The types of questions as well are different. So in CELBAN, everything is multiple choice questions. Even when you have to do the last passage, which is fill up the gaps in a passage, they give you the options A, B, C. Meanwhile, in IELTS, you have completion questions. You have multiple choice questions with 1 or more than 1 correct answers. You have true, false, not given questions, yes, no, not given. You have matching questions or short answer questions. Now, a lot of different types of questions, which means opportunity for error or getting the wrong answer. Meanwhile, in CELBAN, it's all multiple choice with 1 correct answer. In terms of the topics, again, in CELBAN, nursing related topics, topics that you've been exposed to many times throughout your career. In IELTS, there are topics that are quite challenging, and especially passage 3. It's always about a study or a research which uses complex language. The way the passage is written as well, it's quite complex, and it may be a topic that you're not familiar with, and that would definitely affect your score. For the writing, both exams have 2 tasks. For task 1 in IELTS, you need to write a description of a graph or a chart, a table, a diagram, a map, or a process. Meanwhile, in CELBAN, it's always an incident report. For the IELTS task 1, you will need to write about 150 words in 20 minutes. For CELBAN, you need to write 100 words in about 10 minutes. Now, in terms of the topics themselves for task 1, in task 1 for CELBAN, I would say it's definitely easier for you as a nurse because it's always an incident report, and you've done many of these in your career. They're always more or less the same. It could be an allergic reaction, a fall, double dose of some medication. It's topics that you've done before and you're familiar with. The terminology, it's in the chart. It's also easy to understand. The only difference I would say is that instead of writing keywords like you would do in regular practice as a nurse, you need to write full sentences because it's an English exam, but you've done this many times before. For IELTS, the topics could be quite complex, like talking about pie charts about energy. It could be a process about how noodles are made, or coffee production, and so on. Quite challenging in terms of the topics. For task 2, both of the exams have more or less the same number of words and requirements, if I can say that. However, in CELBAN, you have 20 minutes to write, and it's always an opinion essay on a topic that's related to nursing or healthcare. Meanwhile, in IELTS, you could have an opinion, a problem solution, an advice type of essay, or a future prediction. The topics are again varied. If you're familiar with the topic, that's great. You probably can write a lot about the topic. But if you're given a topic that you're not familiar with, it will be a lot more challenging to write a full-on essay about it. In terms of the speaking, now this is where IELTS feels a little bit more enticing because it's only 14 minutes long. Meanwhile, CELBAN is 30 to 35. But remember, IELTS increases in the level of difficulty. So it starts with easy questions about yourself. Do you prefer texting or calling? And then for part 2, they give you a topic, again, quite easy. And then they ask you to talk about the topic, and they give you some guidelines of what to include. So for example, they could say, talk about a hotel that you stayed at that you really enjoyed, and then they give you some guidelines about what to mention. Now, part 3 is where IELTS gets complex or complicated. If you want to call it that. In part 3, you get more academic questions about a variety of different topics, and you need to answer them in an academic way, not about you anymore, but about society in general, or generally speaking. And you need to support your arguments, or you need to give reasons for your arguments, which can be quite challenging if it's a topic that you are not familiar with, again. Now, talking about CELBAN, yes, it seems longer, it is longer, but CELBAN starts with a very easy topic, a descriptive question, for example, about describing the town that you came from. Then you have role play 1, which is a patient interview. Role play 2, you give the patient discharge instructions. And in role play 3, you are giving advice to a coworker based on a situation that they tell you. And then at the end, you have an opinion question or compare and contrast question. The topics are not quite as challenging as the IELTS topics for these types of questions, even though they're more or less the same questions at the end of the exam. Yes, CELBAN seems longer, and the role plays can seem intimidating, but with a little bit of guidance, it's very easy to achieve a score of 8 for speaking in CELBAN. In terms of the marking criteria, for CELBAN, the good thing is for listening and reading is that it's all multiple choice questions. So you don't have to worry about the different types of questions or missing an answer because you didn't know if you add plural at the end or not. all multiple choice. Even if you missed an answer in the passage or in the listening, you can guess and you still have a 25% chance of getting the correct answer. For IELTS, the different types of questions make it a lot more difficult to achieve the score. But also in IELTS, spelling is very important. Handwriting is very important. If you capitalize a word when it's not supposed to be capital letter, or if you don't capitalize a word when it's supposed to be a proper noun, you will lose the answer. Also, they look at grammar. Is it plural or singular? Is it ing at the end, or is it ed at the end, right, of the answer? And that's both for listening and reading. You don't have that problem with CELBAN because it's just A, B, C, D. For speaking, both exams are the same because they look for fluency and cohesion in your response. They look for the organization of your response, how you use your vocabulary and grammar. However, CELBAN looks for a few extra components. They look for how you use your strategies when you interact with the patients in the role plays and how you create a rapport to the patient. But studying a little bit before taking the exam and learning those strategies and understanding the organization of the role plays and what you're supposed to do, it's going to help you a lot, and it's going to make it easier to achieve the score that you need. In terms of the writing, both exams are the same. They look for organization, your fluency and cohesion of your responses. They look for how you use your vocabulary and how you use your grammar. The scores that are needed for the regulatory bodies for both CELBAN and IELTS are a little bit different. For listening, for CELBAN, you need a 9. For IELTS, you need a 7.5 out of 9. CELBAN is scored on the Canadian language benchmarks, which is out of 12. You need a 9. Not very difficult to achieve, between 90 to 100%. For listening for IELTS, it's 7.5 out of 9, which is around 35 correct questions. Writing, it's a 7 for CELBAN, 7 for IELTS as well. Reading is an 8 for CELBAN, 6.5 in IELTS. I would say 6.5 in IELTS is not difficult to achieve. A lot of the students that I had that took IELTS are able to achieve 6.5 in reading, and definitely for CELBAN there's no struggle for an 8 in reading. Speaking in CELBAN is an 8, which again with a little bit of guidance definitely could achieve that easier. In IELTS is a 7. Most students don't struggle to achieve this for IELTS. But again, if you're unlucky and you get some topics that you're not familiar with, your score will be affected. For IELTS, you also need an overall of 7.0. Now let's think about some conclusions for which test could be better. It depends from candidate to candidate or from student to student. Most of my students, they are familiar with IELTS because they took IELTS before for immigration or visa purposes. They took IELTS to get into a review program. So they know about IELTS. Meanwhile, CELBAN, they may not be as familiar with as they are with IELTS. But talking about familiarity, think about the types of topics that you get on both exams. CELBAN is all related to nursing because it's specifically designed for nurses. Meanwhile, in IELTS, you get a variety of topics in a variety of fields, which makes it more complex. In terms of the questions, again, remember CELBAN is multiple choice. IELTS has a variety of different questions. What I would say is good about IELTS is that they offer the one skill retake. Many candidates that I've had as an IELTS examiner seem to struggle with the listening part. If you don't achieve the score for listening, let's say, you could just retake that. Once you are at a score of 6.5 in IELTS, according to research, it's a lot more difficult to improve by half a point. Every half a point takes months of language studies, and a lot of research says that you need about 6 months of studying the language in order to improve by half a point after you pass the point of 6.5 in IELTS. So it's a lot more difficult to achieve the higher you move up. In CELBAN, I'm not sure if they still have that, but it used to be that if you failed an exam, you needed to wait 2 months to retake the exam. And if you failed 3 times, then you needed to wait a year, I believe, to be able to take the exam again. I hope they don't have that anymore because hopefully they have more tests now that they don't have to make candidates wait that long in between taking the exam. Let me know down in the comments what your experience was. In terms of the price, both exams are more or less the same. CELBAN needs 425 Canadian dollars. IELTS varies between 330 something to 380, depending on the institution where you take your exam. The preparation material, it's a problem for CELBAN because there's not much out there. That's almost nothing for CELBAN. Meanwhile, for IELTS, there's a ton of preparation material available. There's books and you can practice very easily. Meanwhile, for CELBAN, there is not such luxury. Now, what would I advise? Oh, it's a little bit difficult. From my experience dealing with candidates taking the IELTS and also marking IELTS exams and teaching CELBAN for a very long time, I can definitely say what I would recommend is to invest a little bit of money into getting a little bit of preparation for the CELBAN exam and then passing that exam the first time. I've had students that took IELTS 10 times and they were not successful. They either got the listening but not the writing, or they got the writing but not the reading, or they got everything but not the listening. After taking IELTS 10 times, they said, okay, I'm going to take the course in CELBAN preparation. They took the course and they passed CELBAN the first time. I think of all the candidates that I see in IELTS taking the exam almost every weekend and how many resources are wasted because they're not able to achieve the score. If they put half of that, or not even half of that, probably like a small percentage of that into actually preparing for the CELBAN, passing the exam the first time, financially will make so much more sense. But at the end of the day, it really comes up to your personal decision as to which one you want to take. I wanted to present both so that you have a better understanding. I hope this video helped, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.